So the royals are nervous that Sarah Ferguson is going to do a tell-all sit-down interview. It would undoubtedly be an interview for the ages. It would make Harry and Meghan look like a visit to a sweet shop. It would be so explosive. Sarah has all the goods, of course, married in 1986 to former Prince Andrew, and has been both an insider and an outsider. And that is a theme explored by my amazing guest who's with us this evening, Polly Vernon. Polly is there's Polly there.
Hi.
Great to have you, Polly. Polly, I would argue, is one of those journalists who's done a great deal to sort of explore that terrain of the contradiction, she's basically got a incredibly impressive body of work, arguing long before it was fashionable, I have to say, that women are allowed to be inconsistent, desirous, insecure, glamorous, fashionable, and of course all summed up in her brilliant book Hot Feminist, which was a absolutely brilliant book at the time. And Polly's written a fantastic piece in the London Times today. The Times, as our British viewers will know, the London Times, as we have to call it in America, about Sarah Ferguson, about this threat, I suppose, that Ferguson has made to give a tell-all interview. So I want to ask Polly all about her piece that she's written today and how she kind of squares her broader philosophy, you know, the defense of women as messy, contradictory, brilliant, beautiful, fabulous creatures, with the sort of harder edge of her Ferguson analysis. You know, is Sarah Ferguson a victim of her own personality? Is she a danger to the monarchy? Is she both? Is she neither? So, Polly, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off. Do you think that Sarah Ferguson will do a sit-down tell-all interview?
If I had to put money on it, I'd say yeah, she will. It feels like she will. I mean, I don't know if that's just me slightly desperately hoping that she will, because my God, I'd love to see that. But she has so little left to lose. And I think part of it will be calculating that there's some way back to the public not loathing her, which I think it's fair to say is the place most of us find ourselves in after the revelation of her email contact with Epstein. But I think there's money in it, and she needs money and she likes money. I discussed that in the piece. So I think she will. Yeah, do you?
I think that she will definitely threaten to. I'm not sure if she, in the end, will decide that her bread is buttered in keeping in with the royal family. She's made these kind of threats before. After the divorce, there was a lot of sitting down with publishers. There was, you know, obviously the Oprah interview did ultimately happen. So I suppose you'd have to think, yeah, she would. And I think, as you say, really, is it really more about, yes, she liked the money, but is it also about trying to rehabilitate her reputation? Because we saw in those Epstein emails, I mean, they were appalling, like literally saying, I'm sorry I called you a pedophile. I only did it because I thought my career might be damaged. You know, I mean, it was unbelievable, wasn't it? And the sort of chocolate and, oh, it's so hellacious of me. And you know, I mean, if there was ever a time that needed a nice, sober, sensible email, not least because it might one day be released, that was it. So, I mean, those emails were ghastly. And I mean, we can't gloss over what Ferguson has done. She obviously took a lot of money off Epstein. Andrew Loney said it might be as much as $2 million.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She is ultimately as you say, most of us are in a position of loathing her. And yet there is some sort of sneaking, it's not quite affection, is there? But there is, I don't know, there's something about her that just makes us not, I don't feel like she's quite as toxic as Andrew, certainly.
There's residual fondness, isn't there? And I think when she first kind of burst onto the scene, she was so fun. And she was the kind of fun we hadn't really seen within the royals before. And she was silly and she was kind of bumptious, you know, and I had a lot of time for her, certainly as a kid then. I mean, I was all about Diana, you know, I was all about the pretty ethereal beauty. But you could see that it would be most fun to be sat next to her at a dinner party. And I think there is, you know, we talk about authenticity all the time. And she is authentic. Some of it's awful. I mean, that's the problem with authenticity. Like when it's genuine, some of it can be absolutely awful. But some of it is very real. It's very unfiltered. And so I think we do engage with that. And I think we do respond to that. And yeah, she's vulnerable. She has always been patently, obviously vulnerable with that sort of jollity.
And you also write in the Times, so I'm just going to read you because I thought there was some brilliant bits of writing, and that's why I asked you to come on. I thought it was brilliant, very intelligently written piece, balancing the reality of where Ferguson finds herself, that sort of residual affection that we had, the sense of betrayal that many of us had when this appalling stuff came out about her contacts with Epstein, you know, even after he'd been convicted of child sex offences. And you, but obviously looking back at the happier when we first got to know the story of Sarah Ferguson, and you wrote, Fergie seemed like endless fun. The press called her fabulous Fergie, but oops, after she did things like fly home first class from New York with 51 pieces of excess luggage, said to include £33,000 worth of shopping, for which there was a charge of another £1,000, and no one ever explained exactly who paid that for. She became freeloading Fergie. And yeah, I mean, she was a lot of fun, wasn't she? I mean, she was, and of course, her mother was, as you write, was a glamorous woman, and you know, famously ran off with an Argentinian polo player.
I mean, even that, you know, even the £33,000 worth of excess luggage, that's appalling and wasteful and decadent and funny. Like it's funny, isn't it? You know, it's sort of, what was she thinking? Well, she wasn't. She was just like, brilliant. You know, I'm royal now. And while I can't ever imagine being in precisely that position, I can sort of see how you get totally carried away with yourself and do that. And I think the point about her mother, I mean, that it's at that point that I feel for her a bit. You know, it's this sort of fantastically glamorous story. And I say in the piece, you know, it's endlessly glamorous. Your mother runs off with an Argentinian polo player when you're 13. But I suspect, you know, from a distance, yeah, super glamorous. When that happens to you, it's pretty different. It's not fun and glamorous at all. It's nothing but desertion. It's nothing but, I wasn't good enough to keep my mum here. And that's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. You also write in the piece, money and her weight intermingled at times, of course. In the 90s and early noughties, Ferguson leveraged that weight, her body, for cash via a promotional deal with Weight Watchers, which seemed hilariously unseemly, déclassé, and exposing by extension of the royals even at the time. Wasn't Weight Watch the thing common people did in drafty village halls? Plus, Fergie would claim it was her main source of income, implying the stingy royals had left her grubbing around in wanton commerciality for dosh. I mean, it was amazing that when Ferguson became the spokesperson for Weight Watchers, I mean, there was an intake of breath all over England, wasn't there?
There really was. Do you remember? It was like, we'd never seen the like of it, and it was that contrast between Weight Watchers, which normal people do, common people, I say, you know, obviously tongue in cheek, but what an incredibly normal kind of mundane thing to be sort of overweight and not have that much money. And then here's this, you know, icon, it's royal icon, sort of, you know, pitching it to the rest of us. And it was sort of, yeah, as you say, sharp intake of breath. What's happened? We felt the rules change around us, didn't we? We felt the sort of ideas of royalty shift. She was divorced from Andrew by that point. Do we call him Prince Andrew because he was still Prince? I don't know. But nonetheless, we could feel things shifting in a way they'd shifted with Diana and Charles's divorce and then Fergie's divorce. But they were shifting again in another way, weren't they? And we were just seeing royalty in this really quite mundane context. And there's still, you know, there was, and we fight it, but there is some shame and stigma attached to weight. And so she was sort of being vulnerable and actively engaging with those ideas as well.
And when you talk about that shift in how we perceive the royals, and Ferguson being a sort of catalyst of one of the first royals that we sort of got to understand in a very different way, who decided to tell us all about their struggles and their life, and there was quite a bit of poor me in it as well. That kind of shift that happened. I mean, a lot of your writing, you've sort of always defended women's right to present themselves, to tell their own stories, and to narrate their own narratives.
Yeah.
Do you feel that? Do you feel a bit? Do you feel let down by what ultimately has happened now with the Ferguson story and the Epstein connection and everything?
I think what you're saying, and I'm deeply flattered, but I have always thought it was incredibly important for women to be allowed to be contradictory hot messes. Like, we are human. And I think there was sort of an idea attached with feminism that we had to be sort of virtuous and pious politically, ideologically, when in fact we are human beings, and as complicated and as contradictory and as messy and as compromised as men. That's sort of, as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the whole point of equality. I feel disappointed that somebody who really crystallized all those ideas, because she was an epic mess, that she then got involved with somebody as totally heinous as Epstein. Yeah, of course I do. Like, that is a line crossed, isn't it? And she knew at the point that she was in contact with him, at the point that she was denying calling him a paedophile in the press when she actually had done that, she knew. So then you're just saying some women do not matter at all, and this man's money and status mattered more. And for heaven's sake, she wasn't the only one who believed that. She wasn't the only one who acted like that. But it is a real shame that she did that, and it is disappointing, of course.
And do you think that you've always, as you say, you've always celebrated the sort of messy, complicated, contradictory women? Do you think Ferguson obviously was that kind of messy human character? Do you think that was part of why the monarchy always found her very threatening, never really knew how to deal with her, never was quite sure how to handle her? I mean, she was certainly a threat to the patriarchal system, right, of the monarchy. I mean, Philip hated her, wouldn't be in the same room as her after the toe sucking, after the photographs were published of, which again is like a very unfair characterization that, it was the toe. Well, it wasn't like she was sucking somebody. Do you know what I mean? And the guy, John Bryan, has always said, I was just kissing her feet. We were playing a game. We were pretending that she was a princess and I was a king or whatever, and I was kissing her feet. It was actually a tabloid invention, right? That she was having her toes sucked by some guy on holiday. I mean, it's actually incredibly sort of sexist narrative constructed around her. And, she's talked herself about being called the Duchess of Pork and, all this kind of stuff that was flung at her for decades, really.
Yeah, she was definitely a scapegoat. And I mean, we have seen women being thrown under the bus in that way by various institutions forever. I think actually, I think it is her messiness, but I think possibly, arguably, her greater crime is she's quite sexy, right? Like, there is a sort of blatant sexiness about her. And I think that, which Diana was beautiful and sort of cool and austere, though she was obviously hiding a whole range of things. So I think it's that it's quite often really threatening to the patriarchy or, whatever institution. And I think women find that difficult as well. So you kind of have a double whammy of men being appalled and drawn and whatever to it, and women being threatened by it. And that can be very, very difficult for a woman in the public eye. So I think that was possibly the real threat that she imposed, that she was this kind of messy, sexy thing in the midst of that institution.
Yeah. So another bit from your Times piece, you say, even pre-Epstein, Ferguson looked like trouble for the royals. The jolly calamity of her, the imagination on the scale and nature of her impropriety, how she bungled through on a wing and an uproarious laugh, and an extraordinary capacity to spend money that she didn't have, money that wasn't hers, a bit thick, a bit selfish, a lot vulnerable, a shouty, spilly outy, hot royal mess, an anomaly among all those stiff upper lips and well-mannered female neuroses trussed up in taffeta. Fabulous bit of writing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, she was, and is still there, isn't she? Like, you never, that spilly outy thing, you know, that's kind of a slightly lewd thing, but I think there was a sense of emotional spillage as well, wasn't there? You never knew quite which way she would go, and there was always potential that she would go there. You know, I think she saw fun and opportunity and naughtiness in a lot of circumstances, and couldn't help being drawn towards them. And again, that's for something as tightly buttoned up as the royal family, particularly then, you know, 30 years ago. Oof. Yeah, that's quite a thing to be sort of harboring. I think they always knew it would explode, didn't they?
I think they did. And I think that, you know, if you look at the sort of timeline of Sarah Ferguson, so she was born in 1959. She was married in 1986. First child in 1988, second child Eugenie in 1990, separated by 1992. And of course, this was the era where it was thought that it wasn't appropriate for royals to get divorced, right? So it was just like you were going to separate and you were going to live this sort of secret life, basically, behind a curtain. I mean, it was incredibly kind of naked deception by the by the monarchy, but that was, you know, the order of the day. I mean, incredible to think, really, that in 1992 the royal family still thought it was going to work to just say, well, they're separated and just no one ever report on anything that they ever do again. But there it was, only 30 years ago. But then that year the photographs are taken with John Bryan. He actually he's a really interesting guy, John Bryan, this sort of Texan financial advisor who she fell in with, and he remained friends with the family and was giving Andrew advice in the early stages of the Epstein scandal, telling him, you know, that he needed to get ahead of it, that he needed, and then Bryan basically walked away from it because he realized that he'd been misled by Andrew, because Andrew would always say to her, I don't know who she is, I've never met, you know, about Virginia Giuffre and blah blah blah. But it's amazing, really, the sort of narrative of Sarah Ferguson's life, that she hasn't actually been a member of the royal family since 1992. I mean, it's over 30 years, and she's still been living off their dime, really. You know, living with Andrew at one end of Royal Lodge, and he lives at the other, and still there apparently, and has set up a bar called the Dog House that she is drinking in with staff and her friends, drinking champagne and bemoaning her lot. So
I'm not keen on the self-pity, I have to say. I'm not a fan.
I think what's been so weird about the whole Ferguson and Andrew story is that when the Queen, and I know it's become very popular recently to say that everything's the Queen's fault, and she knew what was going on with Andrew and blah blah blah, and I'm sure she knew a great deal of what was going on with Andrew, but by that token, Charles did too, right? Because it was a co-monarchy for the last 10 years of the Queen's life. So this I think very grubby attempt to blame the Queen is really wrong, and I think that what's so interesting is that King Charles decided to kind of bring Andrew and Sarah back into the royal fold, because she was never really invited to the family events. She was allowed to go up to Balmoral after Philip had left, because he refused to be in the same room as her. But then Charles very much started bringing them back into the fold. They were at Christmas. They were, you know, Ferguson was invited. Sarah was invited to Christmas. She was invited to do, because she then revealed that she'd had skin cancer. Am I correct?
Breast cancer.
I think both.
Yeah. Okay.
Possibly. And she then did a cancer event with Charles at Buckingham Palace like earlier this year. And then like showing up at like all these events and that Charles had invited her to, sending tweets about how grateful she was, how humble she was. I mean, it looked like for a hot second, it looked like she'd completely pulled it off and got back into the sort of heart of the royal family.
And what's your instinct on that? Do you think Charles thought she could take the heat off Andrew, or we could sort of, she would be a way of moving things on?
I think that Charles just wanted to be seen as the great convener. He wanted to be remembered as Charles the Merciful. He wanted to be remembered as the man who got the family back together. And the problem was that he was handed a sort of very cracked vase by Queen Elizabeth. And you if you held it really carefully in a certain angle of the light, you couldn't see the cracks. But by putting loads of light on the vase, to extend the metaphor beyond reasonable bounds, it melted the glue, and the vase has fallen apart in Charles's hand, you know, and he's now in this terrible situation where, you know, he's clearly not terribly well and not expected to maybe reign as long as people had once hoped that he might reign. And, you know, he's basically going to be remembered for the debacle of Andrew and, to a lesser extent, Sarah, I think. I mean, I think, sadly, I think that this is his legacy. Yeah.
I mean, that is desperately sad, isn't it? I mean, that's your real tragedy. Well, no, the real tragedy is the victims of Epstein, but it's just a horribly sad situation, which doesn't mean I'm not hoping that Sarah Ferguson won't do an interview.
Okay, yes. So that's the other bit of this story, right? And you say this as well in your story. You say the thing is, we would watch that interview, wouldn't we? Oh my God, we would watch that interview. I mean, the story that Sarah could tell would raise the hair on your head. She was there through Diana. She was there through, I mean, like she was there for everything, right?
All of it. And she had a really interesting perspective, I think, because she, as you say, she was an outsider, then she was a kind of insider and not really, and then she was an outsider again, who was still very much inside. Like that's a fascinating perspective.
And also it's that kind of unfilteredness of her. I mean, can you imagine if she went back on camera with Oprah? I mean, honestly, like Harry and Meghan making a few anonymous accusations that, you know, people had interrogated them about their baby's skin color. I mean, that would be as nothing compared
Absolutely
to
nothing. I mean, I can tell because I interview a lot. I interview celebrities a lot, and I can tell she's one of those. Every once in a while, you get an interview subject who just tells you stuff you hadn't asked. What just goes way further, you know this, way further than you ever imagined they would, and kind of brings up extraordinary stuff that you hadn't, in your wildest dreams, you hadn't hoped they'd do. And I could tell she's one of those.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. She's one of those people who, when you listen back to the tape, you'll just keep going to yourself, damn, why did I interrupt them?
And also, I've only got 3,000 words. I need 7.
I mean, like the thing about though, like what she could say is just is so. I think it could potentially be so damaging for the royals. I do wonder, really, though, whether it's all a bit of a threat. You know, I think there's also something about the way the story kind of appeared in various media outlets that seemed to have been briefed by you know, people on her side, and the line in those was very much, she knew nothing about Epstein. I mean, that's just not going to hold water under questioning, is it? Because especially if more comes out about the money and the financial side. And
so you think it's been sort of planted, it's a way of testing the waters, seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that ultimately they're gonna have to in one way or another, they're gonna have to give her somewhere to live, and they're gonna have to give her a pension. You know, and it's going to have to be done like subtly, or it's going to have to be done through Andrew, or it's going to have to be done. I mean, they can't obviously give her a house because the public outcry would be so huge. But at the same time, she has been a sort of de facto tenant / squatter on royal property for 30 years. You know, on the one hand, there's all these stories of all the money, the ski villas that get sold for $13 million, the townhouses in Mayfair worth millions and millions and millions. And on the other hand, there's sort of seems to be nothing at the core of it with Sarah. There doesn't seem to be any business. There doesn't seem to be any explicable way to explain, well, is it really coming from a Mills and Boon book? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Seems
I'm a
unlikely.
writer. I've never made a hit book.
No,
you know.
no, Hot Feminist did not buy me a townhouse in Kensington. Sadly, no, it didn't. Yeah, no, there's not that kind. You know, for a handful of people, there's that kind of money, but I don't think she's one of them.
No. And so, yeah, so my feeling is that ultimately this is all a bit of a bit of a ruse and a bit of a threat and a bit of a flag being flown up the flagpole, because these negotiations, right, are still going on. The negotiations of who's getting what and how much the payoff is and what house they're going to have. Those are all still going on. And I'm actually told by a very good source that Fergie is still getting her laundry done by Buckingham Palace.
So she's drinking champagne in her pub.
Yeah.
She's getting her laundry done. I think that's a lifestyle I want.
I know. I'm like, if this is failure and humiliation, I want a piece of this failure and humiliation. You know, a nice 7-bedroom house on Sandringham estate. You know, but there is something also super weird, isn't there, about the sense of like Andrew and Sarah both seem to be holed up still in their lovely big mansion, you know, that presumably that we're told is falling to pieces. I don't actually think it is actually falling to pieces. I think it's actually quite well looked after. But we're told that they're, you know, the cartoon image is they're holed up in this crumbling mansion, sort of issuing demands about what they want, you know.
And ordering things on Amazon, I believe. There's a lot of Amazon packages. Like an Amazon piled high. Yeah. We want a bigger house. Want 2 of those houses. I mean, extraordinary. I kind of believe that. I can see that.
I mean, you wouldn't put it past her. You wouldn't put it past Sarah Ferguson, would you? Well, anyway, it's an extraordinary story. And if it ends up with an interview, can I just say that I hope Polly Vernon gets the job, because she's a very good interviewer. And what was your opening question?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I generally say, so how's things going? But in that case, I would definitely go in hard on the toe sucking that apparently wasn't toe sucking.
Right. Very good. Right. Well, Polly, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching The Royalist. If I could just ask you a massive favor. If you are a fan of Polly's and you've enjoyed listening to her here today, do make sure that you sign up for her brilliant Substack. You can find her at Polly Vernon Substack, or you can also Google her publication, which is called Broad. And it's very good, very, very good Polly-esque take on all matters concerning everything, really. Will you say what it is, Polly? What is it?
No, but it's called Broad because, you know, I am one. But also, you know, latitude of subject matter. But yeah, really, really everything from sort of Botox to this kind of stuff, really. I take it all on joyfully. Thank you so much. I've had such a nice time.
Well, it's great to have you. Thank you very much for coming. And please like and subscribe. And thanks, everybody, for all your subscriptions to The Royalist. I think we've gone over the 20,000, and I know I'm supposed to do an Ask Me Anything, and I promise we will get round to doing it. So thank you, everybody, and please keep sharing and please keep subscribing. Thank you very much. Goodbye.